Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Wednesday, March the 1st, 2023. Our theme this week is forgiveness. Of course, our gospel reading from this past Sunday dealt with that theme, and we're kind of just exploring all the different aspects of our Christian understanding of forgiveness. I talked mainly on Sunday about the whole idea of forgive and forget. Is it really forgetting, or is it just choosing not to remember? That was the main thrust of it. I want to tell a couple stories of incredible forgiveness. But first, a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. in a sermon he once gave that was published in a book called A Gift of Love. King wrote, "Forgiveness does not mean ignoring what has been done or putting a false label on an evil act. It means rather that the evil act no longer remains as a barrier to the relationship. Forgiveness is a catalyst, creating the atmosphere necessary for a fresh start and a new beginning." And the famous Christian apologist of the 20th century, C.S. Lewis, who wrote Mere Christianity and the Chronicles of Narnia and so forth, he once said, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." The first story I want to share tells of an atrocity that happened during the days of apartheid in South Africa, and the reconciliation that followed in a courtroom many, many years later. A policeman named Vanderbroek recounted an incident when he and other officers shot an 18-year-old boy and burned the body, turning it on the fire like a piece of barbecue meat in order to destroy the evidence. 8 years later, Vanderbroek returned to the same house, seized the boy's father, and the wife was forced to watch as policemen bound her husband on a woodpile, poured gasoline over his body, and ignited it. The courtroom grew hushed as the elderly woman who had lost first her son and then her husband was given a chance to respond. "What do you want from Mr. Vanderbroek?" the judge asked. And she said she wanted Vanderbroek to go to the place where they had burned her husband's body and gather up the dust so that she could give him a decent burial. His head down, the policeman nodded in agreement. And then she added a further request. "Mr. Vanderbroek took all my family away from me, and I still have a lot of love to give. Twice a month, I would like for him to come to the ghetto and spend a day with him so I could be a mother to him. And I would like Mr. Vanderbroek to know that he is forgiven by God and that I forgive him too. I would like to embrace him so that he can know that my forgiveness is real." And spontaneously, some in the courtroom began singing Amazing Grace as this elderly woman made her way to the witness stand. But Vanderbroek did not hear the hymn. He had fainted, overwhelmed. The other story comes from closer to home. Again, an incredible story of forgiveness that comes out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tom McGee was a young man who went out for a night of partying and revelry. He got drunk, ran head-on into a car driven by a young man by the name of Ted Morris. He killed Ted Morris instantly while driving under the influence of alcohol. This wasn't the first time that he'd been arrested for drunk driving, however, so Tom McGee was put on trial for manslaughter, found guilty and sentenced to a term of several years in prison. But the prison was crowded and prisoners were being given early paroles, so Tom McGee actually spent only a few months in prison before being released on parole. But he evidently hadn't learned his lessons, for it wasn't too long before he was arrested again for drunk driving. So his parole was revoked and he was sent back to complete his prison sentence. Jack Morris, the victim's father, visited Tom McGee in prison. After visiting several times, he started taking cookies that his wife Elizabeth had baked for him. And believe it or not, they became friends. Finally, Tom McGee was released from prison, but he had no place to go. So Jack and Elizabeth Morris invited him into their home and gave him a place to stay. They provided the means by which he could receive an education, even helped him find a job. They were members of a Church of Christ in Tulsa, so they took him to church with them as well, where Tom McGee accepted Jesus as his Lord and was baptized. Later, it was revealed that Jack and Elizabeth Morris had formally adopted Tom McGee and made him their son. When Jack and Elizabeth Morris die, Tom McGee will inherit whatever they have accumulated in this life. As Melvin Newland, who shares this story, wrote, "Now that's forgiveness, an incredible story of forgiveness." Again, as King said, forgiveness does not mean ignoring what has been done or putting a false label on it. It means that the evil act will no longer remain a barrier to a relationship. It's the catalyst, forgiveness that is, for creating the atmosphere necessary for a fresh start and a new beginning. Two powerful stories of the power of forgiveness. Fresh starts, new beginnings, reconciliation, inexcusable sins being forgiven. Well, on that note, we'll end this morning, and we'll continue tomorrow as we focus on this whole idea of forgiveness this week in our daily devotions. Until then, take care. Hope to see you then. Bye.